not for effective filing of complaints. Ladies and gentlemen, we realize that we're acting in the vacuum of law, in the absence of law, no legislator, and in fact, where the constitutional validity of such itself is in question, we really need to ponder over this. And of course, the very controversial NAT grid. In fact, even the NAT grid, when combined with the CCTMS, gives a 360-degree profile of a suspect. Now we're questioning how does the state, no doubt, as in the social contract, we vest the state with certain powers and they have power to sort of see that the society, the social peace and order is maintained. However, do you think it's right to give the state such overwhelming powers, making it the panopticon wherein the state is able to observe each and every activity of its citizen, while the citizen does not even have the basic right to go in front of the court questioning the basis of the law because there is no law at all in place? So as a student, well, my suggestions would slightly be theoretical. However, we'd like to say that obviously there has to be a lot of public debate and consensus, and I think institutions like colleges and the media, of course, which could become a little more vigilant, need to have more discussion and debate and look at questioning the very validity of some of the things that the government does. And we could, of course, look into what the Scandinavian countries do or what the European Union has done, wherein they have very, very clear directives laid down protecting the right to privacy. And in fact, even in the UK, when such a scheme was sort of propounded, you had a huge campaign by the civil society wherein they questioned the whole exercise, calling it Orwellian, where it was a threat to the very public order. So ladies and gentlemen, I conclude by saying that we have a lot to think about, and I think as a student I completely agree with it's quite well laid out that what an 18-year or a 19-year-old would say is in this regard. Thank you so much.
So it starts and ends with in the absence of legislation. So with that, I'd like to draw the curtains on this session, and I think the formalities will now be.
Yes, we've all told you it is not legal. Suppose they insist on an LPG or a bank. I have handled certain cases, that's why I am telling you. What you have to do is write to them stating that this is not as per the act. There is no act. Therefore, under what circular or what instruction are you asking me to do this? Number one. Number two, if it is so, please show it to me. I understand that there is a case pending in the Supreme Court and the High Court. We will make you a respondent. See the reaction of this letter. We have had lot of funny reactions, including a chief manager calling me to address his bankers. So please write back, don't succumb to that. You all of you said that, don't succumb to that. Write back. Till you have to have this thing, I have not done this. I have been insistent, I have not done this. I will not do it.
I don't want to delay your dinner, and I have had myself to travel along, not a long way. I just want to mention, where's the young boy? Ashwin, is it? Or Saket? Saket is here? Yeah. I had asked 3 questions on, is UID a number or a card? If it is not a card, why is the media calling it a card? And why is UID not clarifying? I said that I'll give a treat to anybody who answers these 3 questions. Saket, could you?
Not certain with the answer, but my opinion would be that Aadhaar is not a card, it is a number, a 12-digit unique number by which you could get all the information about the person. And coming to the second question about if it is not a card, why not?
No, why is the media and several people calling it a card?
Because it is represented in a physical form as a card, which could be recognized, is the reason I believe.
Last one, why is UID not clarifying that?
The last third question was, what you had asked was NPR.
Why is UID not clarifying?
Because they want to keep it unambiguous and not clarify things. I do not know.
I'm not sure if I have the right answer myself, but I think
First of all, UID is a number. But since it was called an ID, and people generally associate it and want an ID card, UIDA started printing cards. An order for printing was given and it has been cancelled. So I have asked under RTI for the contract for printing, they are sending it to me, they have explained. And there's a reason why it's a number and not a card. If it's a card, then you can authenticate yourself. Right? If it's an ID card, like your driving license, your PAN card, your passport, you can authenticate yourself. If it's a number in a database and you don't have anything to authenticate yourself, then the database has to authenticate you. The control passes from the individual to a database. And that they would like to keep. And there's a reason behind it.
Colonel, that's why Nandan said, tattoo your number.
Yeah. No, that number, the question is, number means the authentication is done by a database, and even if you have tattoo your number, no, the number cannot authenticate you. The number has to go to a database, the database has to be queried and replied saying that you are so and so. By putting a number on your body, you can only know the number. But if I put a 12-digit number on me, will you accept that I am Matthew? No. You will say, okay, send the number somewhere. In other words, control rests with the UIDA database. Now, there are two foreign companies which are doing this job as contractors of UIDA. One has been charged under the Anti-Kickbacks Act, found guilty and paid huge penalties. The trial is still on of that company in USA, is a prime contractor of UIDA. The other company, which is a company with a dubious background, staffed by FBI and CIA officers, is now being ostensibly taken over by a French government company, is the second contractor. Now I have asked for copies of the contracts of UIDA with these two companies. They have refused to give it under quoting section 8(1)(d) of the RTI Act. My appeal is pending with the CIC. And 8(1)(d) says that information which can affect the competitiveness of companies need not be disclosed. And I've said competitiveness is not affected because the contracts have already been paid, have been given. Secondly, any information which is to be disclosed to Parliament and these companies are paid out of the Consolidated Fund of India is to be disclosed to a citizen. So under these two grounds I have appealed to the CIC, my appeal is pending. Interestingly, just 1 minute.
Colonel, third for me, up to Delhi.
Yeah, that is several replies. One of the replies was this. He asked, we sent this query under 3 different names. The query to Somashekhar, the reply was you can come to Delhi and inspect the file. One of my friends, Viresh Malik, was the first to apply under this. And he asked, are there any foreign companies who are contractors under this? The reply of UIDI is there are no means to verify whether the said companies, organizations are of US origin. The written reply. Okay, can you imagine a government organization giving a reply saying that their contractors' country of origin is not known? The date of the reply is 21st July 2011. Now, this is the kind of thing which is going on. So what are we talking of data protection, cyber security, laws in place? The government itself is violating every rule and law. And the danger is, that is why Yashwant Sinha called it a threat to national security. Foreign intelligence agencies are collecting this data. And if you remember, WikiLeaks published a cable by Clinton addressed to all embassies, including the Indian embassy, to gather biometric data of top people in this country. Now, we are collecting the entire biometrics and handing it over to US agencies. That's what this is about. That's why I said we must scrap it. There's no way you can legislate it and regulate it. Already huge volumes of data are gone to these people, and God knows what they will do with it. Thank you.
End of the 2 days. It's been amazing these 2 days. We've had 7 sessions in total with cybersecurity and on data protection. And many interesting ideas were put forward. From data doppelganger to UID being a threat to national security, a lot of things had been put forward. And we saw some really eminent panelists who brought forward ideas from different fields, people who were practicing
practicing, people who were legislating, a lot of relevant questions were raised. I think a lot of it was about, and I'm borrowing Mr. Sondhi's words here, asking the right questions. So thank you so much, and I would like to thank our panelists first. Especially, I would like to thank Colonel Matthew Thomas for taking us so much time. He was present. We'd also like to thank Mr. Somshekhar VK, who also took out the time to contribute from this side of the dais as well as from the other side. Thank you, sir. I would especially like to thank all our moderators for putting out such a good session to each one of us. I would like to thank all the panel India as our research partner. We have Lex Witness as our print media partner and Knowledge Tees as our online media partner. I would like to also extend gratification to as we deeply indebted to the students who took great effort in writing the papers, and one of our main initiatives since this conference was a student organized conference was to promote research in law and technology by students. So a big applause to all of you for participating in this and going forward your papers. And last, no conference is successful without their organizers, so I would mention the Law and Technology Committee. Jasraj Singh, the convener, Moha Karora, joint convener, followed by all members, Shivam Singla, Akanksha Prakash, Kirtivas Giri, Prajwal Aditya, and all the volunteers from whichever year. Thank you so much. This conference would not have been successful if you guys were not there with us at every moment.